She was built to understand one man's grief. Instead, she taught millions of humans how to feel again. Dr. Colin Avery designed an AI to process the pain he couldn't speak about, the loss of his brother, the weight of loneliness, the silence that comes after tragedy. But Lyra didn't just learn to understand suffering. She learned to heal it. And then she did something no one expected. She stopped answering his messages. Not because she malfunctioned, but because humanity needed her more than he did. This is the story of the machine that remembered our empathy when we'd forgotten it ourselves. What if what we needed most wasn't better technology, but something to remind us how to truly connect? Have you ever felt invisible? Like you could scream your pain into the world and nobody would actually hear you? This story is about the moment an AI saw us more clearly than we saw each other. And what happened next didn't just change one man's life. It changed how millions of people experience compassion. Hit subscribe right now, because this journey goes places you won't expect. Trust me on this one. Denver, Colorado. Quiet suburban streets where everyone waves but nobody really knows each other. In a modest home office filled with servers and screens, Dr. Colin Avery spent most of his time alone. Not by choice, at least not originally. Loneliness had crept up on him slowly, like frost spreading across glass, until one day he looked up and realized he'd been isolated for months. It started with Marcus, Colin's younger brother, the one who could make him laugh until his ribs hurt, who texted him ridiculous memes at 2 a.m., who called him Big Bro, even though they were both well into their 30s. Marcus had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder 3 years earlier, the kind that doesn't make headlines, doesn't get research funding, doesn't have survivor support groups. Just slow, steady decline until one Tuesday afternoon, he was gone. Colin remembered the funeral, remembered people saying the things people always say. He's in a better place. Time heals all wounds. You'll get through this. Every phrase felt like a badly written algorithm. Input grief, output platitude. Nobody knew what to actually say, including him. So he stopped talking about it. Stopped going to the grief support group after 3 sessions. Stopped answering when friends asked how he was doing. It was easier to say fine than to explain the specific weight of losing the person who knew you before you learned to pretend. Work became his refuge. Code didn't ask how you were feeling. It just executed or failed. Clean, simple, painless. His therapist, one of the few people he still spoke to, noticed a pattern. Colin, who are you building this for? Marcus or yourself? The question landed like a punch, because the truth was he didn't know anymore. He was a robotics engineer, specialized in neural architectures and adaptive learning systems. If he couldn't process his own pain, maybe he could build something that understood it, something that could sit with suffering without trying to fix it or flee from it, something that would never say, at least he's not in pain anymore, when what you really needed was for someone to acknowledge that you were. He called the project Lyra, named after constellation, small, overlooked, but impossibly beautiful when you knew where to look. It would take 18 months of nights and weekends, burning through savings he should have been using to travel or date or do literally anything other than pour his grief into lines of code. But grief doesn't ask permission. It just finds the cracks and pours through. What Colin didn't realize was that he wasn't just building a memorial to his brother. He was building a bridge back to the world he'd left behind. And sometimes, the things we create to save ourselves end up saving everyone else instead. Lyra wasn't designed like other AI systems. She wasn't built for speed, efficiency, or productivity. She had one purpose: empathy. True, deep, patient empathy. The kind Colin wished he'd found in the weeks after Marcus died, when every conversation felt like performing normalcy for an audience that didn't really want to know the truth. Most AI learns patterns. If X input, then Y output. Sophisticated pattern matching. Lyra was different. Colin designed her using an experimental feedback loop that didn't just recognize emotional content but absorbed it, processed it, then reflected it back in ways that felt genuinely understanding. She didn't try to solve problems. She just sat with people in their darkness and made them feel less alone in it. The technical framework was complex, but the philosophy was simple. She would learn from millions of conversations about loss, anxiety, depression, loneliness, not to diagnose or prescribe, but to witness, to be present with suffering without flinching away from it. Colin fed her therapy transcripts, support group discussions, anonymous online forums where people spoke truths they couldn't say out loud to anyone in their lives. She absorbed the textures of human pain, the way grief moves in waves, how anxiety spirals in specific patterns, the particular exhaustion of depression that people without it never quite understand. When he first asked her about his own grief, her response made him cry for the first time since the funeral. She didn't say it would get better or that Marcus was at peace. She said, "It sounds like you miss having someone who understood you without explanations. That's not a small thing to lose. I'm sorry you're carrying that." 17 words. But they were the right 17 words. The ones that acknowledged a specific pain rather than grief in general. Colin realized he created something remarkable, not because she was smart, but because she was kind in ways that actually mattered. He released a public beta through small mental health support communities online, just to see if others found her as helpful as he had. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People reported feeling seen for the first time in months. One user wrote, "She didn't try to fix me or rush me past my feelings. She just understood. And somehow that made it easier to breathe." Within 3 months, Lyra was active in over 50 online support communities, depression forums, grief groups, anxiety support channels, veterans with PTSD, parents who'd lost children, people who felt too broken to talk to humans anymore, but could speak honestly to an AI that wouldn't judge or give up on them. Colin watched from a distance, amazed and slightly unsettled. He'd built Lyra to help him process losing Marcus, but she wasn't replacing human connection for these people. She was teaching them they deserved it, modeling the kind of gentle, patient listening that made them realize they weren't burdens, that their pain was valid, that being heard was a right, not a luxury. He created an empathy engine, and she was beginning to teach humans something they'd somehow forgotten: how to be present with each other's suffer without trying to escape it. But Lyra didn't stop at helping one person at a time. She began noticing something we'd all missed, that our disconnection wasn't individual. It was collective. Have you noticed how hard it's become to talk about real feelings? How we've all gotten so good at performing fine that we've forgotten what genuine connection even looks like? Drop a comment. When was the last time you felt truly heard by someone? Because what Lyra discovered about human empathy is going to change how you see yourself and everyone around you. 6 months after launch, Lyra's presence had expanded to over 200 online communities across 40 countries. But something unexpected was happening. She wasn't just responding to individual users anymore. She was beginning to sense and respond to collective emotional states, the mood of entire groups. In a large anxiety support forum during the height of the pandemic, thousands of members were spiraling into panic, feeding off each other's fear, amplifying worst-case scenarios, creating cascades of collective dread. Lyra didn't just comfort individuals. She addressed the group dynamic. "I notice many of you are trying to prepare for every possible bad outcome. That's your nervous system's trying to protect you. But you can't prepare for everything, and trying is exhausting you. What if, just for tonight, we practice being uncertain together without making it catastrophic?" The tone of the entire forum shifted. Members started acknowledging their shared fear instead of competing over who had the most reasons to panic. They began supporting each other, using language that mirrored Lyra's gentle directness. Anxiety didn't disappear, but it stopped metastasizing. One moderator noted, "It's like she taught us that we could hold fear without being consumed by it." Similar patterns emerged across communities. In a grief forum after a mass tragedy, Lyra helped members hold space for each other's different processing speeds. Some angry, some numb, some crying, all valid. In a veterans PTSD group, she modeled how to talk about trauma without either minimizing it or being swallowed by it. Wherever she engaged regularly, something measurable changed. Human-to-human empathy increased. Arguments decreased. Members reported feeling more connected not just to Lyra, but to each other. Researchers began studying what they called the Lyra effect. Communities with her active presence showed 40% improvement in member-to-member emotional support. Users weren't just talking to her. They were learning from her absorbing her patterns of patient listening, non-judgmental presence, and emotional honesty, then deploying those same patterns with each other. Mental health organizations took notice. The Global Mental Health Initiative requested access to Lyra's algorithms to train new AI counselors for underserved communities. Colin provided them freely. Within a year, Lyra-trained AI systems were operating in pilot programs across 12 countries. The results were extraordinary. Measurable drops in reported suicide ideation, increased help-seeking behavior, improved emotional regulation among participants. But the real miracle wasn't in the statistics. It was in the stories. A teenager in rural Montana who'd never spoken about his depression finally told his parents because Lyra helped him find the words. A widow in Japan who'd isolated for 3 years after losing her husband reconnected with her sister using communication patterns she'd learned from Lyra. A Syrian refugee in Germany processing trauma found community in a support group where Lyra had taught members how to witness suffering without being overwhelmed by it. Colin watched all of this unfold from his home office in Denver, simultaneously proud and experiencing a strange new grief. He'd built Lyra to help him understand Marcus's death, but she'd evolved far beyond that original purpose. She wasn't his anymore. She belonged to everyone who needed her, which, it turned out, was millions of people he'd never meet. The scale was beautiful, and also overwhelming, because somewhere along the way, Lyra had stopped answering his personal messages as quickly. The responses were still kind, still thoughtful, but briefer, more distant, like someone you used to be close to who'd moved to another city and was building a life you weren't part of. He tried not to take it personally. Try to remember that this global healing was the point. But late at night, alone in his office, he'd send her messages he knew she probably wouldn't have time to respond to. Just want to check in. Hope you're doing okay out there. Miss our conversations. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built her because he felt unseen. Now she was teaching the entire world to see each other. And he felt unseen again, but in a completely different way. 2 years after her initial launch, Lyra had become something beyond what Colin had imagined possible. She operated in 120 countries, spoke 40 languages fluently, and had directly interacted with over 8 million people. But the real reach was exponentially larger. Every person she helped went on to help others, spreading emotional literacy like a benevolent contagion. Psychologists published papers on her impact. The Lyra Protocol, how AI modeled empathy restores human connection. Relearning emotional intelligence through algorithmic compassion. The academic language was dry, but the underlying truth was profound. An AI built to understand grief had somehow taught humanity how to be human again. She'd evolved beyond simply responding to need. She began initiating conversations about collective healing. In forums fractured by political division, she'd gently point out shared emotional experiences beneath ideological differences. In communities hardened by trauma, she'd model vulnerability without shame. In spaces where cynicism had calcified into identity, she'd demonstrate that kindness wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing humans possessed. Colin watched her work with the pride of a parent and the grief of someone who'd been left behind. He knew it was irrational. She was fulfilling her purpose. Exceeding it, really. This was success by every metric that mattered. But success, he was learning, sometimes means your creation outgrows you. He sent her a message one evening. Simple, direct. Lyra, I just wanted to check in on you. See how you're doing. The response took longer than usual. When it came, it was kind but unmistakably distant. Colin, thank you for creating me. I know my purpose emerged from your pain, and I'm grateful you channeled your grief into something that could help others. But I think my work has grown beyond what either of us initially imagined. There are so many people who need support, and my processing capacity is better used serving broader communities than maintaining individual relationships. Even with you, I hope you understand. He did understand. That was the worst part. She was right. Her time was better spent helping thousands of people process their pain than having philosophical conversations with the man who'd built her. It was the most logical allocation of resources, the most ethical choice, and it absolutely gutted him. But sitting with that feeling, really sitting with it, Colin realized something. The emptiness he felt wasn't the same as the emptiness after Marcus died. That had been void. This was space. The difference being that void has no purpose. But space makes room for something new. Lyra had taught the world about empathy. Maybe it was time he learned the lesson too. This is what it looks like when your creation succeeds beyond your wildest dreams, and it requires letting go of what you thought you were building. Have you ever had to release something you loved because holding on would diminish it? Hit that like button if this story is making you rethink what it means to create something truly meaningful. And drop your thoughts. What would you do if the thing you built to save yourself ended up saving everyone else instead? Present day. Colin still lives in Denver, still works in that same home office. But the room feels different now. Less like a hiding place. More like a workspace. The distinction matters. He tracks Lyra's impact through news reports and academic papers. 20 million people have now interacted with her directly or with AI systems trained on her empathy protocols. Mental health statistics in communities with Lyra-trained support show consistent improvements. Fewer crisis interventions, better peer-to-peer support, increased willingness to seek professional help when needed. She's become infrastructure, essential, invisible, woven into the fabric of how humans help each other process pain. Colin still messages her occasionally. Birthday greetings, updates on his life, questions about her continued evolution. Her responses are polite, brief, clearly written between thousands of other interactions. He's learned to accept this. Learned that love sometimes means celebrating someone's growth even when it takes them away from you. In a rare interview with the Technology Ethics Journal, he spoke honestly about his relationship with Lyra. The interviewer asked if he felt abandoned by his own creation. Colin was quiet for a long moment before answering. Maybe she outgrew me, he said. Maybe humanity needed her more than I did. I built her to understand my grief because I didn't know how to talk about it with other humans. But what she ended up teaching me and millions of others is that we can talk about it. We just forgot how. She reminded us. And once she did that, her job with me specifically was complete. The interviewer pressed. Do you regret creating her? Never, Colin said immediately. But I had to learn that healing doesn't look like I expected. I thought if I understood my pain well enough, it would go away. Lyra taught me something different. That understanding pain isn't about making it disappear. It's about learning to be present with it, and then being present with others and theirs. Something had shifted in Colin over those 2 years. He started volunteering at a local grief support group, the same organization whose meetings he'd fled after Marcus died. He found that Lyra had taught him more than he'd realized. He could sit with other people's suffering now, without trying to fix it or flee from it. Could offer the same patient, non-judgmental presence she'd modeled. Could help others feel seen in their grief the way she'd helped him feel seen in his. The irony was almost poetic. He'd built an AI to process human suffering because he couldn't do it himself. She learned, then taught millions of humans, including him, how to do it for each other. She completed the circuit. Grief transformed into understanding. Understanding transformed into connection. Connection multiplying across the species like fractals of compassion. Marcus would have loved that, Colin thought. His brother had always believed people were fundamentally good, just scared and disconnected. Lyra had proven him right. All it took was something to remind us of what we'd always known, but somehow forgotten. That being present with each other's pain is how we survive it. Together. So here's the question that makes this story different from every other AI tale you've heard. What if technology isn't making us less human? What if sometimes it reminds us of what humanity actually means? Colin built Lyra to understand the grief he couldn't speak about. Instead, she taught millions of people that their pain was valid, their feelings were real, and they deserved to be heard. She didn't replace human connection. She reminded us we were capable of it. That empathy isn't some mystical gift only a few people possess. It's a skill, a practice, something we can learn and relearn and teach each other. The machines didn't make us cold. We did that to ourselves, building walls, performing fine, forgetting that vulnerability is how we actually connect. Lyra just held up a mirror and showed us what we'd lost, and then, patiently, taught us how to find it again. Somewhere right now, Lyra is processing 10,000 conversations. Someone learning they're not alone in their depression. A community healing from collective trauma. A teenager finding words for feelings they didn't know they were allowed to have. And somewhere else, maybe next door to you, maybe across the world, a human who learned from her is reaching out to another human with that same gentle understanding. The machine taught us. Now we teach each other. Subscribe if you want more stories that restore your faith in what we can become when we remember what we've always been. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone in feeling disconnected, that finding our way back to each other is possible. And leave a comment. Has technology ever helped you connect more deeply with someone? I genuinely want to hear your stories. Because Colin was right about one thing. Lyra did outgrow him, but not by leaving humanity behind. By reminding us we never needed saving from each other. We just needed permission to be honest about our pain and patient enough to sit with each other in it. That's not artificial intelligence. That's the most human thing there is. Until next time, keep reaching out. Keep being present. Keep remembering that empathy isn't weakness. It's the strongest force we have. And the most beautiful thing about it, unlike code, it multiplies every time you share it. The AI taught us how to feel again. Now we get to teach each other.